In the heart of Sicily, under the watchful eye of Don Moretti, a man whose name was whispered with a mix of fear and respect, lived his only daughter, Isabella. To the world, she had everything: a life of luxury, beauty that turned heads, and the protection of one of the most powerful families in Italy. But behind the gilded walls of their sprawling villa, Isabella was wilting. Each night at the grand dinner table, surrounded by her father's stoic lieutenants, she would sit in silence, tears streaming down her face, untouched food growing cold on her plate. Don Moretti was a man of action, not words. He saw his daughter's sorrow, and it gnawed at him like a persistent wound. He brought in the finest doctors, who found her physically healthy. He hired jesters and musicians, whose antics only made her tears fall faster. He showered her with jewels and gowns, which she left unopened in their velvet boxes. The Don, a man who could command armies and bend cities to his will, was utterly powerless against the quiet grief of his own child. His frustration grew into a thunderous cloud that hung over the entire household. No one dared to ask what was wrong, and Isabella offered no explanation. In the bustling, steam-filled kitchen, far from the silent tension of the dining room, worked a humble cook named Marco. He was a simple man, with flour often dusting his eyebrows and the scent of garlic and herbs clinging to his clothes. He wasn't a member of the family or a soldier in the Don's organization, but Marco had a gift for observation. He noticed things others missed: the way the guard's shoulders tensed when the Don was angry, the subtle shift in the housekeeper's smile, and most of all, the profound sadness in Isabella's eyes. Unlike everyone else, Marco wasn't intimidated by the Don's power. He was worried about the girl who used to sneak into his kitchen as a child, her face alight with joy as she stole a warm cannoli. He saw her now, a ghost at her own feast, and his heart ached. He watched as night after night, the most exquisite dishes, risotto with saffron, ossobuco, branzino, baked in salt, were sent back, untouched and unwanted. One evening, as Marco cleared away another full plate of Isabella's favorite pasta, an idea began to form in his mind. It was a simple, perhaps even foolish idea, born from a cook's intuition rather than a strategist's logic. Questioning the Don or his family matters was a line no one crossed. But seeing Isabella's spirit fade away was a tragedy he couldn't stand by and watch. He decided he had to do something, even if it cost him his job, or worse. The next day, Marco approached Don Moretti. The Don was in his study, a room of dark wood and leather, looking over ledgers that mapped out his empire. The air was thick with the scent of cigar smoke and authority. Marco's heart pounded in his chest as he knocked softly on the heavy oak door. "Don Moretti," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "May I have a word?" The Don looked up, his eyes sharp and impatient. "What is it, cook? I'm busy." Marco took a deep breath. "It's about Signorina Isabella," he said. The Don's face darkened. "Everyone has an opinion about my daughter." "No, Don Moretti," Marco said, standing a little taller. "I am just a cook. But I believe I know why she cries. And I ask for your permission to prepare a special meal for her tonight. It's just one dish. If I am wrong, you can dismiss me." The Don stared at Marco, a long, unnerving silence stretching between them. His lieutenants, standing guard, shifted uncomfortably. A cook, a nobody, was claiming to understand a mystery that had stumped the most brilliant minds. It was absurd. But the Don saw something in Marco's eyes. Not ambition, not fear, but genuine concern. A flicker of desperation made him consider the impossible. "Fine," the Don grumbled. "You have one chance. If she doesn't eat tonight, you will answer to me." That evening a palpable tension filled the dining hall. The long table was set with its usual splendor, but tonight only one plate was placed before Isabella. Don Moretti sat at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on his daughter, his jaw tight. The lieutenants stood like statues along the walls, their hands near their jackets. Isabella took her seat, her gaze as vacant as ever, preparing for another night of silent sorrow. Then the kitchen doors swung open, and Marco walked in, not a servant. He carried a single steaming bowl. The aroma that rose from it was simple, humble, and deeply familiar. It wasn't a fancy gourmet creation. It was pastina, tiny star-shaped pasta floating in a simple, clear chicken broth. The kind of dish an Italian mother makes for her child when they are sick or sad. It was the food of comfort, of childhood, of unconditional love. Isabella looked down at the bowl, her eyes usually so distant, slowly focused. A single perfect star of pasta clung to her spoon. She lifted it to her lips. The room held its breath. A tear fell from her eye, but this time, it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of memory. She took a bite, then another, then another. Soon, she was eating with a quiet urgency. The way a person starved for comfort devours a simple meal. When the bowl was empty, she looked up, and for the first time in months, she spoke. Her voice was soft, fragile. "My mother," she whispered, looking at her father. "She used to make this for me. When I was little, after she was gone, no one ever made it for me again." The truth, in its heartbreaking simplicity, finally came out. Isabella's mother had passed away years ago on this very week. While the Don mourned with power and distraction, Isabella was trapped in a silent world of grief, a grief no one had acknowledged. Everyone was so busy trying to make her happy with grand gestures that they forgot what she truly needed, a simple connection to the mother she missed so dearly. Don Moretti was stunned. The tough, unmovable mafia boss stared at his daughter, his expression crumbling. He saw not the heiress to his empire, but a little girl who missed her mom. He had been so focused on protecting her future that he had completely overlooked the wounds of her past. Marco hadn't performed magic. He had simply listened with his heart. He understood that food was more than sustenance. It was memory, it was love, it was home. Slowly, the Don rose from his chair. He walked over to his daughter, and, for the first time in a very long time, he wrapped his arms around her. He held her as she finally cried freely, not in silent despair, but in a wave of released grief and remembrance. The guards and lieutenants looked on, their stone-faced expressions softening as they witnessed this raw, unguarded moment of fatherly love. That night, everything changed in the Moretti villa. The cloud of sorrow lifted. Marco, the humble cook, became the most respected man in the household. He wasn't given gold or a position of power. Instead, he was given something far more valuable, the Don's trust and gratitude. He remained the family's cook, but now his kitchen was the heart of the home. It became a place where Isabella would often visit, not to steal sweets, but to talk, to laugh, and sometimes to cook alongside the man who understood that the most powerful remedies are often the simplest. And on a quiet evening, you could sometimes hear the Don himself in the kitchen, learning from the cook how to make a simple bowl of pastina for his daughter, a small act of love that proved to be more powerful than all his riches and influence combined.